I want to talk to you about provision and how God provides for us. And really that provision doesn't come in many ways doesn't come until we have our purpose. And really we see that in the first case back actually in Genesis. In Genesis chapter 1 verse 28 is when God gives the command to Adam to be fruitful, to increase in number, to fill the earth and subdue it. So that's the purpose God gave them. Then after that, chapter 2, we see God providing the means to do that. Providing all the animals, providing the plants, the trees to provide fruit. So really what I want to share with us today is this is where we're going to start off with, in which showing us God really, once he gives us a purpose, once he gives us really a thing in which he's called us to do, whatever it is, he will make a way for that to be done. And we will see throughout the Bible, sometimes those ways are very surprising, unexpected. It will go against our normal belief on things. But ultimately, if God is God, his will be done. He will find a way in which his purpose or his acts are met. He will find a means to really achieve what he has put in front of you. Whatever that may be. If there are people that God is putting in your path for you to go to share the gospel with them, or for you to share testimony with them, or simply to give them bread or to give them water, God will make that happen. It is our job to say, yes, Lord. It is our job to listen to that purpose and to submit to it. And sometimes we won't see that provision until after the fact. We won't have those resources available to us necessarily until after the fact. But just hear this, that even in the beginning of creation, God has not changed from that to today. If he is going to put something on your heart, if he is going to lead you to people, if he's going to lead you to a mission, whatever that is, friends, he is there. He will support, and there will be a way. So, friends, I encourage you this day and throughout this week, as we're going to discuss the ways in which God meets us where we're at and provides. Hey friends, it's Nick here again, and we're going to continue our discussion of talking about provision. And this today might be kind of a hard discussion, really. It might be kind of hard to receive, because the aspect of discussion I want to talk about for provision today is when we lack, when God doesn't provide. And yeah, that's a hard thing to hear sometimes. And what I wanted to share is, really, it comes down to obedience. I want to bring us to Deuteronomy chapter 11. And this whole portion of this chapter is actually titled The Blessings of Obedience, especially in my Bible here. But I want to take us to verses 16 through 18, which reads, "But be careful. Don't let your heart be deceived, so that you turn away from the Lord and serve and worship other gods. If you do, the Lord's anger will burn against you. He will shut up the sky and hold back the rain, and the ground will fail to produce its harvest. Then you will quickly die, and in that good land the Lord is giving you. So commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these words of mine. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders." Friends, sometimes that's tough to hear. God's not going to provide us if we're disobeying him. It's like parents. There's a discussion about parenting techniques and what's best. And from learning about psychology from college, one thing that's talked about is the different types of parenting. Whether you use positive reinforcement or negative type punishments. And what they've always found is that using positive reinforcements is actually better when it comes to childbearing. And we kind of see that here with God too. Is that when we misbehave, or that when we disobey and we don't follow him, he's just simply not going to provide. And that not following him can look like a lot of different things. Last week, Scott talked about purpose. And when God gives us our purpose, we stand up and we say, yes, Lord, send me. But not following him can look like different things. It can simply and easily look like just not doing what he's telling us, doing the wrong things. But it can also look like doing the things that we think we should be doing, that we think are serving him. And all along, he told us to not even bother with that. We're asking him and telling him basically how he ought to be God in that moment. And he's not going to respect that. He's not going to provide for that. So friends, really, when we look at this aspect of disobeying, we need to understand that for us to meet God's obedience, for us to be able to receive his provision fully, we have to respond to his purpose, to the letter of the law in that moment. And it's scary to think about. But that's what's exciting in my opinion. When we are fully following him in that moment, doing whatever he asks, he will meet those needs. Today, I want to continue that path in talking about being obedient. I want to share this passage with you out of 1 Kings chapter 17. This is a story of the prophet Elijah, and hear this. Sometime later, the brook dried up, because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him. Go at once to Zarephath of Sidon, and stay there. I have commanded a widow in that place to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? As she was going to get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small cake of bread for me from what you have, and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord gives rain on the land. Friends, one thing I find really encouraging to look to with this passage is just the faith of the widow. For her to be able to give out of her, lacking. She essentially was going to prepare what more than likely would be her last meal. In doing that, a portion goes to Elijah. And her obedience is what gets her to preservation, to be able to continue to survive. I don't really have a whole lot of points to share with this story, but I want to use this just image for us to look to as encouragement. One thing I did want to share, and this comes out of the commentary in my Bible,
says, even when God has done a miracle in our lives, our troubles may not be over. The famine was a terrible experience, but the worst was yet to come. God's provision is a never given in order to let us rest upon it. We need to depend on Him as each new trial faces us. And I'll be quick here in closing. Friends, what was going on was that this widow's son was about to die. Then Elijah would God performing a miracle over him, bringing this individual back to life. But that message out of that commentary, even if we experience God's provision, we don't rest and begin to stop relying on Him. We rely on God each and every day, in the midst of the provision and through the provision. And we don't forsake where that provision came from. We give Him all glory, thanks, and praise in that moment, but we don't stop turning to Him when everything's going well. We're going to jump into Matthew chapter 7, and we're going to see what God's provision actually looks like. Now, I'm not saying that we don't see God's provision up until Matthew 7. No. We see God's provision throughout. But I want to kind of center in on this point that is made in Matthew chapter 7. And hear this. You parents, if your children ask for a loaf of bread, do you give them a stone instead? Or if they ask for a fish, do you give them a snake? Of course not. So if you sinful people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to those who ask Him? Now, friends, these words come from Jesus in talking about prayer. Pointing out to people, look, you know what it is and what it means to provide for your children. You know how to do that. You love them so much that you're willing to do that, to sacrifice. Friends, the creator of the universe, who gave us love, who is love, who is truly, like I said, the source of love, if He loves us to even a small degree, it will be far beyond what we can imagine for what we love other people, whether they're our spouse, our children, our parents, our friends. It doesn't even come close. So if we can imagine what it is to provide for people that we love, think of what God can do to provide for us. When you take a moment to think about that, I almost get chills just thinking about the creator of the universe who offered up so much for us, for me, is available to us to be obedient, and we can receive from Him after being obedient. Man, we can't even begin to imagine just the degree of which He can provide. So friends, I share all this with us today to encourage you, to urge you to reach out, to be obedient to God. And you will be overwhelmed just to see how much He can provide. And friends, I want to clarify, don't hear this as do this in order to receive. Because that's not what it's about. We don't follow God to get good gifts. But it's an understanding of when we follow Him, there are certain things that are made available to us. So friends, I thank you this day. And I encourage you to listen to God's calling in your lives.